Okay. Because of the circus that surrounded Prince Archie's arrival, rather than the baby itself. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry were able to create one of the most bizarre and chaotic royal moments that will never go away. Turning something that is often handled with accuracy and custom into a perplexing jumble that is full of contradictions, secrecy, and what many now consider to be a full-fledged cover-up. The more you investigate it, the stranger it becomes.
I will say that, like a lot of people, I saw the Getty images of the pillow dropping behind the skirt, and I thought at first they could be photoshopped, but Getty images is very reliable.
The official narrative was rather straightforward. When you start peeling back the layers, nothing adds up. For instance, Meghan allegedly went into labor in the morning, delivered birth, and the palace announced it later that day. However, that is only the version we were spoon-fed. Early, but it took the palace nearly 12 hours to explain the situation to the media, making it even more perplexing when they finally did. Harry and Meghan's public relations staff had already pledged to notify the media when she gave birth. So you may believe it was just a private moment for them and not a huge deal. When reporters inquired about it, the palace responded with a carefully worded statement that sidestepped the actual problem and placed the blame on the media for misinterpreting their timing. The situation worsened during the brief period between the palace's announcement that Meghan was in labor in the Instagram post. People can argue over whether Meghan used a surrogate, whether she wore a moon bump, or whether any of the theories circulating are true. But those details, while juicy, aren't even accurate. When journalists asked directly if the baby had already been born, palace officials denied it. The point: the palace lied on behalf of Harry and Meghan, and if the monarchy isn't supposed to do anything, it's lie about the fundamentals of succession. Dan Wootton, an executive editor at The Sun in 2019, has been hammering home this point for years and was likely the first mainstream journalist to expose how strangely. He even forced Buckingham Palace to record 8 direct questions concerning Archie's birth. This was an almost unprecedented measure, and it should be clear how alarmed they were that the palace realized something wasn't quite right. Dan's primary hypothesis was that the announcement was purposefully postponed to coincide with the palace denied it, of course, but when every action seems to help the Sussexes' American PR game, it's difficult not to notice how everything coincided with the 8 a.m. New York shows, like CBS This Morning, where Gayle King just so happens to be Meghan's friend. To raise an eyebrow, and this is about transparency, not about disparaging Meghan, for the sake of it. You cannot play the "we want privacy" card while also planning photos, shoots and releasing content cautiously. If you are a royal couple with a child in the line of succession and you are a taxpayer-funded pair, carefully chosen documentaries if the intention was to protect their privacy. It backfired spectacularly because no one now trusts the story they told, the timeline, the announcements, or even the baby bump. Once you lose public trust, especially as a royal, it's nearly impossible to regain it. This was not just bad PR. It was a complete media disaster. Meghan's bump turned into its own plot point. When the internet first discovered it, it was enormous, but the next day, it was nearly flat. Videos of her tummy folding when she sat down began to circulate, sparking wild debate about whether it was a moon bump or a padded prosthetic. Rather than providing clarity, Harry and people weren't just guessing. They were growing to believe that something was being concealed. The mainstream media didn't want to get involved because it was too controversial and too near to conspiracy. But that's when journalism lost its edge as Meghan went farther into concealment. Protecting individuals from awkward inquiries isn't the jobs. The questions about Meghan's pregnancy were endless. But major media outlets avoided them. Only a select few, like Dan Wootton, dared to question the palace, and when they did, their responses were generic and robotic, never getting to the heart of the lies. One particular instance that stood out was the twerking video, in which Meghan was purportedly not yet in labor with baby Leet. Even individuals who had never questioned the first pregnancy began to wonder, hold on, what is going on here? After seeing a video of her dancing, smiling, and appearing totally at ease and discharged at the same time, the timetable didn't make sense. Camilla Tominey, a well-liked colleague, the Daily Telegraph's editor, wrote about it, but she never once thought that the bump might be fake. When asked about it, she acted as though it were beneath her. This is the issue with journalists who act too respectable to look into real inconsistencies. If the palace had followed tradition, simply speaking the truth, or even half of the truth, would have prevented this from getting out of control. But once you start lying, everything you do seems suspicious. What's even stranger is how the palace handled Harry and Meghan's communication strategy. It was chaotic, with emails delayed, announcements going awry, and timelines that didn't match at one point. Attributed the failure to notify the media, promptly in 2019, to a technical glitch, as if phones didn't exist. It wasn't just a mistake. It appeared to be a clumsy cover-up, and Buckingham Palace, a symbol of protocol and order, appeared weak and disorganized. Then there was the Instagram post, which is how the world officially learned about Archie's birth. It was a social media post rather than a formal royal statement or traditional press conference. And when reporters asked if Meghan had given birth, during that brief window, the palace flatly denied it, knowing full well that the baby had already been born. That's where it goes wrong, because it's not a lie. It's a lie. When your child is vying for the throne, privacy ceases to be a question of personal preference and instead becomes an issue of public trust. You are more than simply a couple. This is why Harry and Meghan's staff attempted to frame everything around privacy. As an institution, you are not allowed to change royal customs simply because you want to, even though they have attempted it before, exploded in their face, and to make matters worse, they took the palace down with them. Buckingham Palace lost credibility because it appeared to be following their example rather than setting the tone. The entire situation left royal watchers perplexed, journalists irritated, and the public wary. This wasn't just a failed media strategy. This could have been a moment of celebration, unity, and even modernity. But instead it became a masterclass in how not to handle royal communication questions. The questions continued after Archie's birth, and it became a symbol of how strained things had become between Harry, Meghan, and the crown, which is what's so frustrating. One significant one concerned the picture call at Windsor Castle, where Harry and Meghan presented their child to the world in a well-planned occasion with no outside media and no genuine spontaneity. It was set for 12:40 p.m. UK time, which coincidentally coincided with 7:40 a.m. Dan. Wooden immediately asked the palace if the photo call time was chosen to coincide with American news shows. Did people notice that the Sussexes were broadcasting on American morning shows? Or were they more concerned with their US media presence than their role in the British monarchy? A chilly, predetermined no. The family's trip to Windsor to introduce Archie to the Queen and Prince Philip was the basis for the timing, but even that didn't work out. Why would one of the most anticipated public events, a royal photo op, be scheduled around a private family visit? It seems strange, as if someone was working backwards from a US media outlet. Harry talked about the experience in glowing emotional detail, describing how incredible Meghan was during labor. But the palace refused to confirm the location of the birth, which alone sparked speculation among all royals. He also pretended that it was just royal logistics, which created another mystery. Where was Archie actually born? The baby before him had their birthplace verified, so why conceal this if it was merely a typical hospital birth? The refusal to respond only heightened curiosity, not decreased it. Additionally, there was the succession line, since Prince's son, Archie, is a direct descendant in the royal line, which requires proper legal documentation. Royal birth announcements are usually marked with information like the attending physician, the hospital, and a statement outside the palace. But with this birth, the customary sign-offs were either late, ambiguous, or non-existent. Nevertheless, announcement procedures and formal acknowledgement from the palace are crucial. Received a delayed press release in a filtered Instagram message, which further complicated matters. At first, the palace attempted to pretend that nothing out of the ordinary had happened, but the contradictions were mounting. One outlet claimed that Meghan had gone into labor, while another said that she had already given birth. And when reporters demanded clarification, the palace press, and a palace full of staff advisors and public relations professionals, officers became key at one point and even claimed that the announcement was delayed because of an email failure. They said that if this had happened once, people might have ignored it, but the entire situation was entangled in inconsistency after inconsistency after inconsistency. Meghan and Harry sought to modernize the monarchy, but instead they brought chaos. They seemingly didn't realize, or perhaps didn't care, that wearing the crown's weight doesn't give you complete control over the story. And when you do, the backlash can be vicious. Their actions didn't just raise eyebrows, they also created a void of trust. And in that vacuum, ideas went haywire. Extreme opinions suggested that Archie was a borrowed child or that he didn't even exist. These theories weren't made up. Rather, they were the result of the couple's inability to communicate openly and the palace's reluctance to enforce it. Some people said Meghan had used a surrogate, while others thought she wore a fake bump. It was always about the truth, not hate, and the truth is still lacking. Beyond all the conjecture, we do know that Meghan and Harry lied. The palace supported them, and the public was left with a royal riddle that hasn't been solved.